air inside apartment 4B didn't just hang, it stagnated, thick with the ghosts of 1,000 cheap meals. There was a suffocating, almost physical shroud, a heavy mix of stale instant noodles, the sour odor of unwashed clothes, and the cold metallic tang of laundry that had been forgotten for weeks in a bucket of gray water. Frank Castle sat in a reclining chair that had long ago lost its cushioning, leaving only a hard frame that bit into his thin skin. His skeletal body, a map of old scars, was draped in a tattered gray bathrobe that looked more like a funeral shroud than a garment. Outside, the Ohio sky was a bruised, sickly purple, weeping, a cold and relentless rain. It didn't fall so much as it smeared, leaving long weeping scars across window panes coated in years of soot and industrial neglect. To the world outside, Frank was a ghost, a 75-year-old relic of a war everyone wanted to forget. His hands moved with a permanent rhythmic palsy, and his meager pension barely kept the lights flickering. But there, on a scarred wooden desk, sat an impossibility, a top-tier Neuralink VR headset. Its surface was polished to a mirror finish, so clean it seemed to repel the very filth of the room. It was his altar, his only way out of the tomb. When Frank pulled that visor down, the world didn't just change, it died. The gray walls, the smell of rot, the aching in his joints, they all dissolved, shredded by a blinding surge of neon blue data streams. "Welcome back, Ghost!" A melodic AI voice whispered directly into his synapses, bypassing his broken body. In that heartbeat, the tremors died. His spine snapped straight and strong. In the virtual sprawl of War-Mech, Frank was no longer a broken man. He was the apex predator. He spent his sleepless nights commanding gods of steel, his mind dancing through invisible controls with a lethal precision that made younger players look like fumbling children. Here in the blue light, he could finally outrun the ghosts of the jungle that still screamed in his sleep. Here, he was the master of a reality that obeyed his every whim. The immersion was suddenly shattered by a sound that shouldn't exist in a digital war zone, a sharp physical knock on real wood. Frank gasped, his lungs feeling the thin air of his room as he pulled off the headset. The HUD of his game lingered like a neon phantom in his retinas. Standing in the doorway was Miller. They had shared a foxhole in Da Nang once, but while Frank brought the jungle home in his nightmares, Miller had traded it for a suit that cost more than Frank's annual rent. "They're unveiling it today, Frank," Miller said, his voice carrying an edge of practiced excitement. "The Ares Project. The General remembers your scores in the simulator. He wants the man who beat the system to show these rich donors what this beast can really do at the charity gala." The gala was a sea of polished metals and expensive champagne, a world that felt fundamentally wrong to Frank. A stark contrast to the grease-stained workshop where the beast waited. In the center of the hall, draped in a heavy black silk veil, stood the Ares prototype. When the veil dropped, a profound silence swallowed the room. It wasn't just a tank. It was a masterpiece of lethal geometry, a predator rendered in matte black composite. Its hull didn't reflect the light. It seemed to consume it, creating a dark void in the middle of the opulence. Twin railguns sat like predatory fangs on the turret, and the rear launch bay promised a clinical slaughter. This was the pinnacle of 21st century warfare, an AI-integrated fortress designed to win wars without a single drop of American blood ever touching the soil. Miller leaned in close. "Go on, Ghost, get in there. Show them why the old guard is still the best." Frank climbed the cold, serrated rungs, the smell of hydraulic fluid and ozone filling his lungs like incense. As he slid into the seat, the tank seemed to wake up, its systems purring like a dangerous cat. Neural link cables snaked out like silver serpents, seeking the ports on his helmet with a soft hiss. "Ares online!" The tank's voice boomed deeper and more primal than anything Frank had ever touched. Synchronizing neural mapping. Warning, unidentified solar flare detected. High energy EMP surge incoming. The world didn't just end, it turned to white fire. A sound like 1,000 glass bells shattering echoed inside Frank's skull. The high-tech cockpit buckled and warped. Digital displays bled into a chaotic kaleidoscope of red and green static. Frank gasped, his lungs burning with a thick heat that had no business being in an air-conditioned hall. The electric hum was silenced, replaced by a rhythmic, terrifyingly familiar sound. The thud, thud, thud of a Huey helicopter's rotors. The smell of expensive perfume was gone, replaced by the choking stench of rotting vegetation, damp earths, and burnt sulfur. Frank opened his eyes, blinking away the white spots. The HUD of the Ares was still there, flickering in an ethereal blue, but through the glass viewports the polished floors were gone. In their place stood a wall of emerald green madness. Massive teak trees reached up toward a sky thick with monsoon clouds, looking like the twisted fingers of giants. The humid heat hit the tank's hull like a physical blow. Next to him, Miller was slumped in the gunner's seat, no longer the confident politician, but a terrified man clutching his head in the wet heat. Frank looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was ticking backward, the numbers spinning before settling on a date that made his very blood turn to ice. June 12, 1968. He wasn't in a game anymore. He was back in the nightmare, but this time he hadn't come as a victim. This time he had brought a god of war with him.